Hi, everyone. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, actually.
It's COVID time. No, there's no time. There's no meaning of time. It's day,
There's
night, whatever.
no meaning at all. It's all blending together. But yes, thank you all for joining us today so that we all make sure that everyone is in the right place. We are very happy to have all of you joining us for today's Lunch and Learn on pausing your business. And so for everyone's reference for all of you that are tuning in, today's event is being recorded. And for all of you that are attending, we will be sending you a link after today's webinar. So, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Now I'll introduce you to our team. So I just wanted to present to all of you our program director, Colleen McAlooney. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without her leadership. She is the director of our center, the Patsy T. Mink Center for Business and Leadership. And so I'm Brittany Montiliano. I'm the program manager for the center. And also too, we have Malin Zambrano, who is our program coordinator. Just for your reference, in case any of you have any technical issues, please contact Malin. She'll be putting her information into the chat area. Now, today's webinar is being presented by our center, the Patsy T. Mink Center for Business and Leadership, and also QM Bordenave. And for your reference, here's the contact information if you'd like further assistance after today's webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. We have Ryan Hugh. Ryan Hugh is the managing partner for Hugh and Bordenave. Hugh and Bordenave is a Honolulu-based law firm that provides business, personal injury, as well as litigation services to clients in Hawaii and California. And Ryan will definitely be telling you more information about his practice and the work that he does for transactional and compliance work for assisting small as well as medium-sized businesses. So we can't wait to hear from him. And I would like to also introduce you to our moderator for today, Noella Napoleon. So Noella is our amazing lead business counselor as well as instructor for our center. If you are interested in signing up for any counseling or also to any of our workshops, Noella is, we're so grateful to have her assistance. And so Noella, I hand it over to you.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Today's topic, pausing your business, is something that we normally, as small business owners, it's something we normally don't want to think about, much less, attend a webinar. About it, but I commend everyone today because it is tough out there. I just want to say, we're all in the same boat. And, attorneys in private practice, they're also small business owners. So Ryan is a small business owner. So he feels you, as am I. I'm a small business owner over 25 years. And I can honestly say out there in business land, that you are not alone. None of us are. So embrace today. And we have some really quality information for you. And, I'm very inspired by Oprah Winfrey. And for those of you who watch Oprah, she says, when you're contemplating a huge decision, life-changing, we can get stuck because of sheer fear. We don't want to pull the trigger on that decision, right? So let's look at it this way. Oprah says, when you're faced with a scary decision and you're confused, get stuck, think about what is the next best thing for my life. The next best thing. Doesn't have to be what's going to solve my life, right? And we can think about that in the same way for our businesses. What is the next best thing? So I want to leave us with that because our goal today is to help everyone walk away better informed and able to make the most informed decision as possible, right? Information. Then once you have that set up before you, we can better make the next best decision for us, all right? So without further ado, as they say, I introduce Ryan Hugh. And Ryan, you can introduce your team today if you would like. And can you just say a few introductory remarks, and then we'll get started with some discussion.
Of course, I'm happy to join Patsy Team Inc. once again. I'm happy to be a business law core attorney. The funny thing is my law firm does personal injury and litigation through my partner, Bordenave, Treasurer Bordenave. And some people always ask me, is like, how do you guys do personal injury, but you're a business attorney? And I'm like, business owners are people too. They get harmed and injured. And thus I was like, it's not a conflict for us to assist a business owner in their insurance claim or whatnot. But I'm so glad you started out that way, Noella, in terms of chapters. We'll talk very bit about bankruptcy in those chapters, but from an attorney's point of view, I do a lot of forming of businesses, but I spend a large time talking about what is your exit plan, especially in business partnerships. When do you terminate this part? When does it end? I mean, what are your goals to get out of this situation if things don't turn out well? And even on the personal situation on death and incapacity, again, what is your exit plan? Can you run this business without your partner? So even at the beginning, a lot of times with an attorney or an advisor such as yourself, we also talk about that's great, growth goals, success goals. But if your business doesn't go the way you want, not because it's your fault, is due to a pandemic that nobody saw coming and just shutting down everything, what does your exit plan look like? And that's kind of what we'll be focusing on today. Even if you're not going to close or pause your business in this situation, it's good to have the information because maybe you might pull it out at a later date. And I think Noella is absolutely right, is that the best attitude of viewing it is the closing of one chapter is just that. It's just closing of one chapter of your business. For a lot of successful business owners, they've actually had many business failures and they take those lessons from that failure and then translate it into a new, more successful business. But today we're going to focus on, unfortunately, the pausing or closing or what happened in that situation. So thank you for having me, and I hope we can learn something together today.
All right, wonderful. So let's get to it. And Ryan, out here in entrepreneur land, or especially the circles that our networks, we've been talking about pausing our business, and closures. So I'm going to set the tone for the rest of today. And can you just educate us about what does that mean from a legal standpoint, pausing one's business, and also pausing versus closing the business? Just set it up for us.
So typically, the way the news kind of reports situations of suspending, pausing, those are kind of just terms about, they're not legal terms. There's no such thing as pausing your business entity. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. But to me, when you talk about a business, especially a business entity like an LLC or corporation, that continues on in perpetuity and duration. Just because you decide to pause business operations or suspend a lease, that doesn't mean you've gone out of business or closed the business down permanently. So usually a pause or a suspension just means the operating activities of the business entity have stopped for whatever reason. And it can actually even happen, COVID aside, lockdown aside, is that, as I mentioned, is especially if you have a business partnership, if there's a death of a partner or an incapacity of a partner, sometimes the other remaining business partners can't carry on, so they suspend or pause that operating activities. In terms of closure to me, generally, when I hear that, means is that the business owner or owners have decided that it is time to shut down the business permanently. And usually the closing down or pausing or suspending of operating activities is the first sign of that. But there are a lot of other back end things related to the LLC or corporation that they have to take care of as well. But permanent closure to me means is we're dissolving the corporation, or we're dissolving the partnership, or we're terminating the LLC. That's what it means to me.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So definitely, whether we are suspending our business or permanently shutting it down, the idea is that, you know, there's processes involved in steps. We can't just walk away from our business, right?
That's the worst decision you could make. And you know, the thing is I have a lot of people like that, and what they don't realize is that you could be accruing taxes and fees. Skipping out on town basically in your business means the creditors can pierce what we call the veil and go after your personal assets. So that, yeah, that's the worst decision, is to run and hide.
So the next thing that I'm thinking about, which is, so for that matter, when we set up our business, we're told, well, you've got this limited liability of if you're a corporation, definitely, and also if you're an LLC. So can you touch upon that liability piece as it pertains to LLCs and corporations and sole proprietor?
Sure. So I think that's a good kind of place for us to get all on the same page before we dive too deep into dissolution and terminating your business. But for those of you who have LLCs or corporations, I'm probably going to spend most of today focusing on them, but just really quickly is sole proprietorships are the easiest thing to start. I always like to use the lemonade stand situation. If you go out and start selling lemonade, you're a sole proprietor. Partnerships are, I grab you, Noella, and we start selling lemonade together. If you notice in those situations, we didn't have to file anything or whatnot. We just started selling, and we may have to pay taxes. But in terms of starting the business entity or business relationship, it's just you start putting yourself out there, and that's what they are. There's no formality to them. Moving up the chain is LLCs and corporations are business entities. They're legal persons. They're not living, breathing persons like you and me. But to get that legal person status, you have to file articles. So there are articles of incorporations for corporations and articles of organization for LLCs. That formality is one of many that you're going to have to take, and you're going to see that if you have a process to start the business entity, you also have a process to wind down the business entity. The whole purpose of that process, though, is that legal personhood status that gives you limited liability because it's its own person. That's what you want. You want your creditors, you want your customers, you want anybody to basically put liability on the business entity and not yourself. Sole proprietors and general partnerships don't have that. The person who's just running the business is fully liable for the debts and obligations of the business. It doesn't have limited liability. So that's why we want LLCs and corporations. But if you noticed, as I said, there's a process to start them. There's also a process to end them. Oh, Noella, you're muted.
So that's just common sense, but it's good to know, actually, as we're just in the weeds operating our business, it actually seems like the most natural thing. I don't want to do my business anymore. I don't want to, I'm just done, right?
Throwing in the towel, and I don't want to do any, I'm over this. It's like, mentally and physically, I get it. You can be over it, but unfortunately, your attorney, accountant, financial advisor, and banker, or whoever, they'll be like, that's great. There's a whole bunch of paperwork and things you're going to need to do first.
Yeah, especially our vendors too. They kind of want to get possible. So, you know, it's like a divorce. You're not divorced until the paperwork's done, just like you're not married until the license is signed, right? Okay.
Exactly, exactly.
All right. So think of it that way, everyone. There's got to be a paperwork in place, okay? So thank you, Ryan, for that. Let's talk now about, gee, you know, so about that. And this is where it's going to get interesting because the process. What exactly is a business closure? You know, we see this word dissolution, and I'm really not clear about exactly what that means. So, can you talk about the process for
So
dissolving a company?
sure. So we're gonna take just so that people can understand, because a lot of times why people get turned around by the formality of LLCs and corporations is usually it's one or two people, right? I am the member of the LLC. I'm the owner. I'm also an employee. You get all these labels, but they all mean different things in the law. But in terms of dissolution for a big corporation, because it follows all the formalities, and there's tons of shareholders, there's a board of directors, there's officers, and then underneath them, right? So the shareholders own the corporation. They appoint directors. Directors create a board of directors. There's a president, secretary, and whatnot. Again, in a very, very small corporation, it's usually one or two people that occupies every single one of these roles. But I'm spreading it out so you can understand why we're so process oriented for business entities. Underneath them are usually CEOs, CFOs, or direct employees who report to the board about the performance of the corporation. So, you know, if your corporation isn't doing well, maybe there is a decision or a point of motion to put forth, maybe it's time to dissolve the company. And everybody votes on that basically and says, I vote to dissolve the company because it's no longer performing profit wise or whatnot. But that's really the beginning of the dissolution. That is to come to a formal decision to dissolve the business. In terms of after that, what the employees, officers, directors, and everybody is charged with the corporation is to wind up. We use the term wind up or wind down. I believe Hawaii uses the term wind up, basically means the same, but the whole concept of winding up is while you're not suspending business activities or operations when we're talking about a pause, what you're really seeking to do is untangle all those relationships. If the corporation is a separate legal person, there's all these contracts with suppliers, vendors, utilities, government contracts, contracts with your customers and clients. We are during the wind up and winding down process seeking to unravel and untangle all that and making sure we're getting rid of every single liability. In addition to, right, we're going to do an accounting of all of our assets and then begin paying off liabilities so that there's nothing left over. At the end of the whole process of winding down and shutting off, basically shutting off the power and paying off your electric bill, as an example, if there are any assets left over, usually those get sent out to the owners of the business. In this case, we're talking about shareholders of, well, we're going to cash out everything and whatever money remains, you're going to get your proportionate share of whatever assets remain in the business entity. After everything is said and done, you then should be taking care of closing down any remaining bank accounts, tax IDs, and then filing your articles to basically say that this entity no longer exists. And that is the whole kind of nutshell process of deciding to, we're done, we're going through the process of unwinding and winding down everything, and then finally finalizing all your paperwork with various, whether they be the bank, the government for tax IDs, of closing and shutting that. And like I said, if there's anything left over at that, usually not in terms of things are so dire, I mean, that's why you decided to close, then you can give and distribute. But usually what happens is you got to pay off your creditors first and your taxes first well, usually it's taxes, then creditors, but you got to pay that all out first and then anything else. So that is the whole process of dissolution or dissolving a business.
So, Ryan, I have a question.
Mhm.
So when we work with an attorney to wind down the business,
Mhm.
so that's why we're going to hire an attorney, because there's all these steps involved. Do you usually give your clients like a checklist? Is it like a back and forth partnership thing where we supply this and then you do this? Can you just paint a picture of, is there like a checklist, a master? How does that work? Can you paint a picture for us?
For me, I do have a generalized checklist, but I'm going to say, unfortunately, it depends because not every business I work with is the same. So if you're, for instance, a professional accountant, a professional consultant like an accountant, your business assets and liabilities are not going to be the same as, let's say, a dentist or a doctor's office or a physical retail shop. Even an e-commerce retailer versus a brick and mortar retailer, their business financials look completely different in terms of what they have to be concerned about. But generally speaking, my checklist is starting off at the ownership level of, well, what are the responsibilities and liabilities of the partners at top? What are we looking at? And are there personal liabilities that, like, for instance, signing a personal guarantee for a bank loan? Because I want to analyze what the interests or issues are for the partners at their level, because that's going to guide and control the decisions. Because remember, we have to start with them first because it's their business. On the business entity side, I usually ask for, is there, what are the outstanding debts and obligations, and are they secured or unsecured? And again, this usually, that's why I asked that question to the business partners first about, what kind of personal liabilities have you accrued attached to this business? Because then it usually segues into the discussion about landlords and banks, because those are the two that generally will ask for personal guarantees. If they don't, then we move down. Other kind of secured situations are for brick and mortar situations is, if you have heavy equipment, how did you finance this? Does the lender have basically a UCC filing, a security interest that they can come and basically yank the refrigeration unit out to kind of reestablish or get the collateral back? Finally, underneath that are all the unsecured liabilities. And then that's when we're getting into the nitty and gritty. Unsecured liabilities could be, do you owe somebody out on a contract? It could be as simple as that. Or even for restaurants or coffee and bars or whatnot, if you have coupons, those are liabilities. You agree to render services in exchange for money, even if it's a coupon. And a lot of people issue coupons without expiration dates. Well, you got to put out notice about, this is the last day you can use this with us. So I can't give you an exact nitty-gritty because it's very industry kind of specific, but in terms of liabilities, usually that's my starting point, is what are all the outstanding relationships and what are you going to be liable for? And yes, how much money are you owing? Because usually then we'll develop a strategy for payment plans or reaching out in terms of, hey bank, we're thinking of closing. Do you want to negotiate with us on this? Or landlord, I know I have a term lease for 5 years and we're only 2.5 years into this. Is there any way we can get out of this? So that's kind of the checklist that you should have in your mind of, what are all these relationships that you owe a duty to or that you have to do something for? And it's not always just money.
Right. That's fascinating because, the loan part, when I asked that question, I was thinking about, all these people, idle loans and all this kind of thing, right? But then as you started to describe, loans are kind of the obvious liability, right? We all know loans have to be paid back. Shining a light on all those little corners, like coupons. I had a store in Ala Moana, and the previous owner had a coupon with no date on it. And I had people from 10 years dusting off their little coupon that had been through the wash and coming into my store from Canada and going, I want to double this and that.
I want my $5 off, even though everything is like $500.
Yes.
Yeah.
So shining a light on all those things. Yeah.
I think you've seen me do it, Noella, and my clients see me frequently do it, but I usually like to draw out just so graphic representation so people can kind of get it is I kind of draw out my contracts as little kind of stick figure situation. And, there's a relationship between the entity and other people's. And usually there's benefits to that relationship, like getting money, but there's also the liability of giving somebody or something, work, right?
Yeah.
So, where's my blue pen? Anyway, if you guys can see this at home. So if you have the LLC, the blue and the red, well, it's supposed to be an arrow and I dropped my blue pen. But anyway, the reason why I show you that is I use that graphic representation to get people to understand there's a relationship between persons and your LLC or your corporation. And the red is usually meant for liabilities. What do you owe the other person? And it's not always money. And the other situation is blue is you have benefit or they owe you something. And where are you in that relationship? So a lease, right? You get to use the land or the property, but your obligation is you got to pay. But some of the obligation on top of that is right, well, you also sign the obligation to be there in for the full term. So what are you going to owe the landlord if you're not going to use the full term? Because they expected that cash flow. So that's one of the situations where a lot of store owners now that jumped into their lease situations, especially like in Kaka'ako, they signed term leases with, Howard Hughes or the McNaughton Group or whoever they signed. And a lot of the store owners, unfortunately, are learning that, in commercial lease land, you are not a residential tenant. You don't have as many protections. And when they say you owed us this amount in full term, we're going to have to sit and have those unpleasant conversations. So that's one of the biggest extreme examples. Oh, Noella, you're muted.
Yeah. So that's thanks for that. So everyone, let's just be mindful that it's not just the obvious, not just loans, the lease, the roof over our head. Certainly everybody, utilities, your vendors, think about all these things. And that's why it's important to go with the pros. That's not promoting, Ryan's not here to promote himself or attorney services. It's just that this is like startup. Closure is not something we want to fool around with, because we want to be done when we're done. We don't want all these lingering tentacles, out there.
I think, so not to upsell attorneys or accountants or financial advisors or mentors, but it's sometimes helpful to get that second pair of eyes. Did you think of this? Did you go through this? But for people who have really, really small businesses, they're probably not going to need the assistance, or at least just a quick once over by somebody else in terms of probably the accountant, I'd say over the attorney, in terms of closing down their business. The reason being, I mentioned that, is the tax liability thing. And a lot of times people forget you should be filing closing tax returns even for a business entity and closing things out with the IRS. They do keep track of that, especially if you're a serial entrepreneur. and you're intending to start a new business, remember your social security number is attached usually to the EIN of the corporation or LLC.
Right.
So you want to make sure all your tax liabilities are taken care of if there are any.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So, Brian, in your experience, just, you know, you don't have to name names or anything, but just when should, when is it a good idea to seriously think about closing your business?
Um, in my personal experience, I think a lot of business owners, when they see headwinds and they're starting to, and they realize they have to pay their employees, but they're not getting a paycheck themselves anymore because they're, again, that's another liability, is you have to pay your employees too, if even a close down. But um, that's usually when they come and say, what are the options, which we'll get into probably later, but what are my options of closing down this business? And then I run through that kind of checklist. Well, what are your outstanding what do we have to what would the wind down process look like? But usually when they do see economic headwinds, they begin to piece out the strategy. In business partnerships, usually the thing I have business owners do is sit down at the beginning of the business, as you mentioned. To me, it's kind of like business partnerships are like getting married. And so for us attorneys, if you're in family law, which I'm not, but in family law, we talk about prenups, and that's how do we get out of the marriage. Same thing in business partnerships is how do we get out of the business partnership? And so that roadmap is already created. It's just a decision on an economic level of, I can't do this anymore. But sometimes the business goes on. That's why we're talking about pausing, suspending, and closure. Sometimes one business partner remains and finds a new one or keeps the business going, but one of them exits out. So in terms of your question, my experience for most clients, it is that I'm working 80-hour weeks and I haven't gotten paid in like 2 months. And I have rent, I have personal rent and stuff like. Usually, what I tell them is it might have been better to talk to me a month ago, and rather than put it this way, Noella. If you have that sinking gut, kind of like, oh, I should know all my options before this gets any worse, that's probably the better time to do it.
Yeah, because we too here at the Patsy Mink Center, we're connected to the SBA, Small Business Administration. And one of the things, unfortunately, that we have to concede to sometimes is that, oh my gosh, you know, we wish we had met earlier. Had we partnered up earlier in the business life, it would have been a far better picture, because when someone comes to us and they are already knee deep, they've mortgaged their home, that's the worst scenario.
Uh, I think the worst situation that people, before you bet the house, basically, you should find out what the option of closing down. I think a lot of people in small businesses, and that's a good time. That's why planning and mentorship are so key. Is going back to that business plan, or what was your original strategy or goal? Is like, maybe this is the sign to get out, but you wouldn't know if you don't go back to that. But what I'm saying is a lot of business owners, I feel, small ones, they get in this process of, I have to keep feeding the beast.
Yeah.
But by doing that, you keep digging the hole deeper, which then when you start leveraging, oh, hey, friends and family. And I was like, didn't you already ask your parents
Yes.
or your siblings for money the first time to start this business? If you're
Yes.
going back to them again, yeah, your family members might not sue you, but that's a really bad sign that I was like, how much more are you going to take from everybody
Yes.
else? And especially, as you said, if you're going to take out a personal line of credit because the business is all tapped out, is this really
Yeah.
worth it to kind of keep going? I
Yes.
As you know from an advisor, we can't, I'm never in that shoe. I don't have the fire and energy for your business. I'm only here to advise, but I think it's really up to the business owner to have that gut check or that pause moment of, do I really want to, what am I doing? I'm going to be accruing more liability.
And you have to take, this is where, we have to be a little bit, how do you say, depersonalized. We have to step back, which is hard to do. So I'm particularly interested. I love this conversation we're having, and it reminds me that you mentioned earlier partnerships are like a sole proprietorship, but now you've got two people.
Mhm.
So, in just again, subject in your experience as an attorney working with people for partnerships, what are the signs do you think that partners should consider parting ways?
Like a marriage, a business partnership is all about trust and communication. And I usually tell people, in my personal experience, as soon as one business partner that isn't the business entity, so right, we're talking about LLCs, corporations as persons. I'm talking about one of the business owners of a partnership running to me or to my partner, does all our litigation stuff, and wants to know what their rights are and liabilities against their partner. That to me is a huge warning sign that somewhere along the way is that the trust and communication has broken down, and you are trying to figure out what a lawsuit looks like against your business partner. And I can't emphasize it enough is lack of communication starts eroding at that trust. I think in terms of ending the partnership is that any beginning of where there's a lack of communication, which bleeds into mistrust, is definitely a sign that this partnership is probably going to head into collapse. Because if you can't speak to your business partner without an attorney or two attorneys in the way interfacing, I was like, there's really no point in having this business entity, this relationship together.
Have you ever seen partners come back from the brink? Like, let's say, get the help they need to work out those communication issues and go ahead and heal that relationship and move on? Or is it usually...
I myself have not. I do think there are, and I think it's like a marriage, but I think that's when attorneys get involved and they're representing, each partner has, I've never been in a situation, but I've heard, there was like a 30 partnership situation in each one, 30 attorneys, right? And there's the attorney for the corporation in itself. Remember, corporations can have unlimited amount of shareholders if it's not an S corp. Anyway, that aside, I feel like in this situation is I've never really seen people come back from the brink. They just not talking to each other. The money. The funny thing is whenever I hear, oh, it's not about the money, and I'm like, I'm your attorney. You don't need to lie to me. It is. And because when I put it into perspective of like, well, would you settle this tomorrow for $500,000, $1 million? Oh, they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I was like, okay, so it is, value and worth is a money proposition. So I've never, in my personal experience, seen people come back from the brink, but I do think it happens. But I think it's an 11th hour kind of like, hey, let's work this out. Let's talk. I've never personally seen it, but I do think there are other people who have had a situation. I'm assuming it probably happens without the attorney because there's fighting and then there's healing.
Yes.
And then so usually I think if they heal, they usually don't need an attorney's assistance for that. The other option too is that mediation, which is not arbitration. Mediation is sometimes a good thing for business partners if it truly isn't a money issue and it's confidential, which is probably also why I've never seen it, is that they go into mediation and they talk things out and they have a mediator draw up a mediated plan.
Okay, and that's funny. I was just talking about that with a client this morning, and I can't recall. I have done a mediation early in my career, but is that free, Ryan, through the courts? Let's say you take out a lawsuit. Is mediation free through the courts?
There is a court-appointed mediator, and usually a lot of times a judge, especially if it's a small claims or smaller dollar amount in court, they will ask, do you want to have a mediator? And a mediator, it can be, it's a part of the, well, it isn't free because you've already done your court filings and you're already there.
I see.
Usually what I recommend is one of our great kind of mediations, even before you file the complaint, is let's see if we can talk this out and get them in a room or have a mediator kind of go between, because I don't think people realize how expensive and exhausting actual litigation is. Talking about processes, that's a real process. That is not a pleasant process.
All right. Well, at least we know, right? Options, right? So mediation thing, that's an option. Okay, you've got to explore the hows on your own and figure it out. But mediation.
I think, especially for those business owners who are partnered or married, it's kind of just like seeing a marriage counselor that I feel is like, you know, before things get bad, let's see if we can talk it out.
Yes.
And maybe we need that third party that go between as a mediator. So sometimes I suggest if things are starting to get rocky between business partners, but they're not there yet at full blown, I'm not talking to him or her, is maybe schedule or ask the mediation services that exist around Hawaii. And there's many, not many, there's several. What does it cost, and when can we sign up? And this is our issues.
Fabulous, thanks. So that's mediation, guys. Okay, and so this is a little sticky, but we're interested in knowing, Ryan, what would require, under what circumstances would individual partners be liable for? Are all the partners liable for all the debts, or is one partner more liable? Can you just touch on that?
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, I'm going to give you the attorney response. It depends. But with regard to who owes what, a lot of times, especially in large groupings of partners, we tend to look at the operating agreement if they have one of the LLC about what was agreed upon. Other situations and just the pure kind of cold calculating analysis is, well, if one partner took out a loan and it's a personal loan, and let's say I'm representing the other partner who is not on their loan, if there's no written agreement, unfortunately, that's your own personal loan. So that's why it's best to kind of work these things out before and figure out what's agreed upon. In terms of who owes what on the business, it can reach to all partners who probably have a direction or control or supervision in paying out. So a lot of times what business partners experience is that one business partner says, well, if we just defund the business and we pay ourselves all out, we don't need to. I was like, that is the worst decision, because if you guys go along with it and there's a written recording or documentation evidence of it, well, your creditors will pierce that and go out, because now you've pocketed the money or the assets personally and will claw back. You can pay yourself a reasonable salary or ongoing expenses because, you know, you're a business owner, but purposely defunding a company or moving assets and things like that, that is where we get into problems for all the partners is as well. We don't know who knew what, but we're going to go after all of you and figure out, you know, somebody's paying this. So again, communication amongst the partnership, but communication amongst the creditors, and then working out payment plans is usually the most ideal situation. But yeah, you can be personally liable, especially the worst situation is the Uncle Sam is that if they feel that you fraudulently conveyed assets out to avoid paying your taxes, because taxes are always old. Uncle Sam, well, I mean, that could also actually include a jailable, or that's a crime. So
yes.
that isn't something to take lightly of, well, you know, if we just shift assets around and make ourselves look even worse, that we won't need to pay. I was like, no, that is the wrong decision to make.
Yeah, right, right. Okay, thanks for that. And then I'm going to summarize my next two questions so
Okay.
that we can do that and have some little bit of time left for open Q&A, okay?
Okay. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to say the two questions and you can tackle them in any order you please. And then Brittany, if you can give us the signal once, as soon as Ryan's done, open the gates for the Q&A, okay? All right. So the first one is, Ryan, going to be what factors affects the length and complexity of a business closure?
Mhm.
And the second question is, what are some options to get out of the business? Some
Right.
exit strategy options.
So the things that drive the factors that I've experienced that drive how long this business closure, the winding down or winding up process that we talked about before, is number of business partners, number of debt, like line iteming all that debt and how big those outstanding obligations are, amount of back taxes owed. This is a huge problem I find with a lot of business owners is they short shrift their taxes and their tax bill starts becoming bigger and bigger and bigger because they're like, oh, I'll pay it back, but they as we talked about, keep feeding the beast. The other thing that tends to drive this situation of length of time is complexity of certain business arrangements or relationships. Even in a fire sale situation of closing down a business, especially if you're somebody who is intellectual property heavy, that is, you own a whole bunch of intangible, like licensing rights, permitting rights, and things like that. Those tend to be actually very complex relationships because a lot of times the business owner may want to sell the goodwill, a trademark, or copyrighted material, or assign it to somebody else, but they in themselves are heavily intellectual property is heavily driven by contractual, not just the IP side, but contracts themselves. And then finally, for a lot of small business owners, because, you know, I talked about big corporation, but the shareholder, the president, the secretary, treasurer, CEO, they're all one person or two persons in a small corporation. And there's a lot of feelings and emotions tied to it. And I have a number of situations where people are starting new businesses because their mom and pop are done, but the mom and pop or even grandfather still want to stick around and own a bit. And I was like, maybe it's better you not be a business owner and you kind of just like you lend us your name or be a consultant. But as I said, the letting go, I don't envy a lot of those mom and pop stores that announced in the past couple of months that we're done. I don't think they made the decision lightly or easily, but that is another factor that I find drives length. Shifting really quickly to options, because I know we have bankruptcy. A lot of people feel like they're not making money and bankruptcy is going to be their saving grace. What you need to understand, there's two types of general bankruptcy for business owners, and one of them is for the business and small, or the business owner, that is the individual. And then the other one is only towards the business. And they're basically liquidation, which is we're done. And the other one is reorganization. Those are the two options that business owners are going to sit down with a bankruptcy attorney. I myself am not a bankruptcy attorney. We usually refer that out. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is oh, well, most people actually don't usually qualify for bankruptcy. It has very specific requirements. And that's why working with a bankruptcy attorney to see if you're eligible is one of the key factor steps. The thing is there's a lot of specificity to be even apply for bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is a separate matter. There's a court for it. There's a federal bankruptcy court. You don't go to a regular district or circuit court or small claims court. There is bankruptcy court, and it's a federal, and it's a heavily guided process. Other alternatives. If you're getting out of business, I always tell people, well, what is it worth to you in value? Just because you're done, maybe there is a potential buyer out there. And maybe that potential buyer is actually your niece, your nephew, or your relatives. Maybe they're done with their corporate life where they want to move back and they want to take over your business, yeah, you may have to sell it for pennies on the dollars, but that's better than sitting for months or years on and unwinding everything. Is like, well, here's a business, you make it work, but I'm willing to sell it or assign it to you. Another situation is in a leaving partner situation. Maybe it's time to find another business partner who has enough energy to carry this on, and they'll infuse new capital into the business. Along those lines, in terms of business partners, I think we were talking about as we're setting up for this seminar is some of the older local businesses, I want to say like Shirikia, when the Japanese parent company was leaving, is that the local employees wanted to band together and buy the business. So I usually tell business owners is, did you ever think of offering your key valued employees kind of profit sharing? Yeah, it eats into your own personal profits, but if they have some skin in the game, maybe they can add or infuse new energy, but they are becoming your business partner. So go back to everything we talked about prior about having business partners. So not everything is going to be easy, but there are other ways forward without just full stop. I'm going to hide in my closet or crawl up into a tiny ball and just give up. You have to kind of be creative sometimes in the ways that you exit. And I think that leaves us a good kind of chunk for a good 2-3 questions, depending on how fast I talk.
Yep, thank you, Ryan. That was superlatively awesome because I learned a lot today. So I hope everyone was taking notes, and now it's time for just open Q&A. If you would kindly, you're welcome to let's have you use the hand raise and go into the participant box at the bottom. Okay, and then you can see an area, you see the 3 dots. Oh, sorry. Brittany, can you explain where to find the hand raise? Because I don't see it on my side.
Right. So for all of so everyone who's attending today, in the participants box, so if you don't have that open yet, all you have to do is click on the participants icon that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then that should bring it up. And right underneath there where it says mute or they have different options, there should also be one that says to raise hand there. So I saw that one of you had a question, and so real quick, Noella, Ryan, I just wanted to summarize the 2 questions that were in the chat
Okay.
earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. So Bryson Jang, he had actually put in a question about what are suggestions for working with a landlord if you try to end a lease early? And I think that's actually a question that we received from a lot of small businesses that we're working with right now, right? They're trying to figure things out. And then also too, we had a question from Melissa Kanoy. She had some questions about what would be some tips to negotiate your unsecured bank loans? Is it realistic to bring them down by about half the total amount? So those are 2 of the questions that we had in the chat.
Okay. The second one, yes, an attorney kind of can be involved, but for the bank loan situation, sometimes it's better to bring in your accountant, your finance person, because we're really at that point talking about dollars and cents and amounts and calculations. But let's deal with Bryson's question, because I'm getting that a lot too. To be blunt, you're going to, because of COVID, going to have to unfortunately slightly play with an open hand when negotiating with a landlord. And there are a couple of factors that I tend to look at when approaching it is, are we dealing with one of those large national or international landlords, or are we dealing with local landlords? And for the local side, I divvy it up because my office is basically a mom and pop if you can be a mom and pop landlord, but anyway, it's a landlord and it's a small kind of family that kind of owns the commercial property, or is it something like the McNaughton Group that it's a combine of project development, stuff like that? Because those first 2 categories, as I said, huge, super international, national, and then is it local? The reason why I asked that first is um, on the internet is all going to be about business and what industry you're in. Um, for instance, using one of the bars that I represent, they're able to get an abatement until the mayor here opens, and it's an internet.
Brian,
It's an international
can you just
company. Yeah.
explain abatement real quick? What does that
Oh,
mean?
yeah. Abatement means is that the rent has stopped until some point of time. That doesn't mean you don't owe rent. It just means your rent, your month-to-month rent, has stopped for the period of whatever is agreed upon. Jumping back to what I was talking about, yeah, they understood, and they would rather have a business owner in there than not. Switching down to the local situation, if you have a mom and pop type of landlord, it might be really hard. And so you're going to have to offer some type of realistic payment plan for you and them, because the reason the pressure is coming because they probably also have a mortgage on the property, or they've building buildings, or the way they finance the commercial property, they themselves are probably also personally on the hook. So they're not really going to be in a position. Yes, they're translating that stress down to you. They're not really going to be in the mood to say you're scot-free and off the hook, because they themselves are not going to be scot-free and off the hook, because they're going to eventually have to pay a bank or somebody else. So actually that's the toughest situation when it's small to small. And frankly, my feeling is you're probably going to have to do a payment plan situation of how the in-between situation, just to be blunt, is I think a lot of it is when you have a local landlord, but it's one of the project developers. I think there's some politics and calculation that go into it, because those go hand in hand in terms of way. And so, yeah, sometimes you will have to do a payment plan. Other times they're nice enough to, yeah, we understand there's no market, because the ultimate argument for most retailers, restaurants and stuff like that, if I fold, who are you going to get to come into this space? And that's usually the biggest kind of thing. And that's why I said you got to play with sometimes an open hand in good faith and say, this is what I can realistically pay in the future. If COVID numbers come down and we reopen up and I'm allowed to stay, that's kind of what you're going to be playing with, and they want to see what you can pay off. Biggest point, in any negotiation, if there are favorable terms, or your property manager who acts as the go-between or on behalf of the landlord, it says, yeah, sure, get that in writing. I was like, glad to have that meeting or chit chat or phone call with you. Yeah, rent abatement for 3 months. Send a follow-up email and just confirm. In these trying times, I always tell small business owners, especially with your landlords and the property managers, if you get something favorable, write it down and have them acknowledge it. That will be very critical, because we're anticipating the fallout from this is there will be a lot of fighting in terms of what is owed. So I do recommend formalizing any amendment or changes to your leases, or even temporary agreements of, well, I'm going to pay you a lowered, reduced amount of rent.
What about subleasing, Ryan?
I was about to get to that as assignments and subleasing. That is the creative strategy. So sometimes a restaurant is maybe have somebody do a pop-up in your restaurant. 2 issues. You have to check your lease, and usually the landlord always has a consent right to subleasing or an assignment. Even if you assign out the rest of the term of your lease, your landlord needs to approve the new tenant that's jumping into your lease. Or if you have a subtenant, they still need to approve the subtenant. Second component is understand premise liability issues and insurance issues. As I said, my business partner's personal injury, right? If you're going to lease out or sublease out, and your landlord's going to require it anyway, make sure they have insurance, but they're also indemnifying you, because you're now in the middleman and they're using your space. And you don't know, You're not going to sit there overseeing their use of your space, probably.
And Ryan, have you seen, back to the other question, have you seen banks work out unsecured loans? Is that something you have observed? Like, I have this big loan, and can I negotiate you down by half? Is that something that banks do?
In my experience, generally the bank, I suppose it depends on what we're talking about, how big and what your relationship with the bank is. But your banker, especially if you've created that personal banker relationship, they're going to be the ones that will not put any of the, but talk you on the side about what the bank's calculation or situation is. But just to be blunt, I've never seen them. What is owed is what is owed to the bank. That's why they're the bank. In the bank's defense, on the flip side, because of the Great Recession, the banks are in general, in terms of federal regulations and things like that, tied in terms of renegotiating some types of loans, depending on what you have. That's what caused a lot of the problems in the first place, is undervaluing or underwriting or kind of reducing outstanding loans. So the thing is that your situation is the bank's hands might be tied, and it's because it's a compliance issue as well.
So I heard relationship again, communication. If I can offer, just as a business owner, having survived 9/11 and a lot of other things, yeah, it is really about communication. I would say, it doesn't hurt to ask. Just don't come off, excuse me, like totally ignorant. You want to go in expecting something reasonable. We want to go in understanding their position and what's realistic for them. When we show that we've done our research, that we're coming in with something reasonable, right? I have found that whoever we're negotiating with, whether it's the landlord, the credit card companies, they're much more amenable to having a discussion rather than, charging it or crying. Like, yeah, a lot of, that's not the best strategy. But be informed, come in from a position of confidence, and just try to have that conversation.
I would say do your crying, screaming, and shouting, but do it before your meeting. I found that while they're sympathetic, they can't do anything with.
Yes.
Crying is not an offer on table that they can take back to their superiors. They do. Most of them do feel for you, but like I said, the person you're usually communicating is usually a frontline, even if they're a personal banker or a higher level, if that's the kind of account you have, they still need to vet it. So that's important, getting the emotions out and stuff like that. But then, as Noella says, is do your research and ask what options are available, but come up with your own offer at first, if that's the kind of relationship, and see if they accept it, reject it, or say, no, this is what we can do back for you. So
Yes.
Emotions are important. I'm just saying there's a time and place for that.
Yeah. And I believe that they will respect you. They'll understand that you're not trying to get something for free, because there are people that do that. But you're coming in with a reasoned, you're making a business case for why this, whatever you're asking. That's the point for us to remember. Think about the business case, and the way you make a business case for something is always understanding in negotiation. You always show that you understand the other person's position, and it's a much stronger place to be. Make a business case for why they should concede or make compromises or what have you.
I think the biggest kind of tip is working with somebody like yourself, Noella, before they come to see me, is clean up and get organized. Print out some reports and things like that and see where you can cut or make shit. I'll put it this way. It's like having a really messy house or messy room. Is if you clean and organize it, you might discover things that you didn't know were buried in there, or
Yes.
dumping out all the trash and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I was like, you find out, oh, I can have a much tighter ship or cleaner house, that way. So for us, that is paperwork, reports, assets and liabilities, those relationships I was talking about. Because when you do come see me, I kind of do like it if you're a little bit organized, because then I don't need to weed through everything.
Yes. Yes.
But for you, for the business owner, it helps you reorganize and kind of, I was like, okay, this is what I have and what I don't. And this is because it's very easy to pay short shrift to your accounting, your taxes, your long-standing agreements. But getting into the mode of organizing them and seeing what you have is actually one of the first critical steps of, do I think I can make this work, or where can I kind of basically trim the fat off, or cut out expenses? And in other situations is, at least I can go to the attorney and accountant and they have kind of everything line item. So that's what I sometimes say. Maybe it's time to clean up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good point. Any more questions? I see we have one new message. Okay, Brittany. Sounds like we need to wrap up, but I really love those questions that came through. And Brittany, can you let us know if we have more time for questions, or do we need to end the session?
Um, so if everyone is okay, we can actually, maybe stay on for maybe one more question,
Yeah,
Ryan, if that's okay.
I'm happy to.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. And so before we go into that last question, just in case any of you who are tuning in right now, they need to log off. I just wanted to, again, thank Noella and Ryan for helping us today with leading this webinar. So this is actually something that we've been hoping to put on for a while now, because a big part of managing your business is understanding all of the options that you have, including, the topic that we went over today. And, grateful for the knowledge that they're sharing, as well as the tips. And so, as we had mentioned earlier, if you do need further assistance with your business, whether it's a small business, coming in for small business counseling, or even to legal counseling as well, we do offer that here at our center. So Ryan is actually one of the attorneys through the Business Law Corps, and the Business Law Corps, they're a great resource, and we're so lucky to have, their assistance for our clients. They provide free business counseling, free legal counseling for small businesses through our center, as well as at Innovate Hawaii. And then also too, if you are interested in, meeting with a business counselor, we have Noella here, but also too, we have Kelly Nambo, who is our other counselor that we can also get you set up to meet with. But yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat, or even to raise your hand in the chat area, and Noella will be calling you. But thank you
And
all.
let's, Brittany, if we could do this while you guys are putting your questions in your chat, I would love it if we could toss it to Ryan for a bit, or Leilani, whoever. Ryan's got some exciting things coming up, and I would love for Ryan to just give a little bit of information about your upcoming programs.
So I've been asked to be a panelist for how have gay-owned businesses handled COVID-19. You don't need to be a part of the LGBTQ community. It's just something that they're doing because it's Hawaii Pride Month.
Nice.
But I found that for business owners, because we don't have what is called water cooler talk, and Noella did a pitch out in terms of, I am a small business owner. I have been there with you. We applied for PPP too and things like that. So it's like, what do you need? I was like, yes, as an attorney, yes, I can advise clients, but I also, as a small business owner, have done the things that you have done to keep the lights on.
Right.
The only reason I'm talking about this seminar is I find that people, in terms of diversity of seeking out other business owners and their trials and tribulations, whether it's your own personal one that you can relate to or not, that kind of drives new nuggets of information, wisdom, or experience, because their experience is not going to be the same as yours, and vice versa. And also, you never know, because I've discovered for a lot of business owners, when they attend events like that with other small business owners, is that nowadays with social media and the internet, and types of marketing and advertising, it begins fruitful conversations for collaborations and other types of partnerships. So I urge you, because we will be talking, I believe the panel is myself, an attorney, Dan Chang of Wang Chung's bar, who did, I believe he suspended operations of the bar. So more insight about suspending. And then Ari South of Aloha Apparel and T-shirts and designs. And
Wow.
I think she was second runner-up of Bravo's. It's the one where it's clothes designs and stuff like. I'm not a reality TV, but yeah, she's a famous reality TV star. So.
Okay.
So it's going to be a good panel, so you can see different insights how everybody has kind of coped with COVID-19 as well.
Is that the
Yes, thank
Rainbow
you.
Town Hall? Rainbow
Thank
Town
you.
Hall?
Yes, thank you. Somebody put yes, Project Runway.
Oh, Project Runway!
Yeah.
Love that show. Okay, so the link for the Rainbow Town Hall is in the chat. Please go ahead and visit that. I think I might tune in myself and get a ticket. So thank you so much, Ryan. This was fabulous information. I hope everybody is jazzed about the opportunity to listen to this. And again, Ryan from Q and Bordenave, we will put the information up as we sign off. We'll keep his company slide up with his information, okay? And we'd like to thank, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was like, my philosophy is you really shouldn't fear your attorney or whatnot. Yes, I'm not gonna lie, we are expensive. Even myself not as expensive as a large downtown law firm, but still. But I think it's very important to use your resources like Patsy Team Inc. Seeking out people with, I can give you legal liability and I can impart some of my own kind of advice, but I always tell people is that wisdom and experience is something different, and that's why business mentorship is so important, and people like Noella and Patsy Team Inc. are great. And that's why I tell business owners, network with figure out other things, but running and hiding is on the lawyer front, on the business, that is the worst decision. That is the worst decision.
Yes. And I want to say that I'm sorry, now the tractors are rolling in my background. I'm at my office. I want to say that in my over 25 years of business, the best decisions I have made is getting an attorney for my contracts. You know, in all these years of business, I was sued once. I mean, I was sued 3 times because I'm in the food business, but once I kind of lost, but not even entirely. Once in 25 years. Okay, it's because I have great contracts in place. And at certain junctures, you need to pay. It's a small price to pay. I don't care if it's a few $1,000s. Think about it. You're going to pay a few thousand to save thousands and to save your sanity. Okay? I can say that with 100% confidence. Do not scrimp when you really need an attorney. Okay? All right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just remember sometimes it's better to pay somebody maybe $100,000 versus paying out tens of thousands or 20 or hundreds or millions. You know, it's better to lose by a little rather than lose by a lot. So sometimes you have to pay for that.
Right.
I know it's not a warm feeling, but sometimes that's the calculation we have to make.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. And we'll wrap it up with a toss back to Brittany, who will bring us home real quick.
Yes, thank you so much. And so, as we mentioned, Ryan has an event that's coming up, so please be sure to check that out. I know that, it's hard when we're going through all of this information and you need that time to digest. So if you find that you have other questions, or also too, like how you were saying, to connect to other small businesses as well in the community, please be sure to check out his event at the end of this month. And then also too, for us, we do actually have a couple of events coming up for the small business community. If you haven't registered yet, please do so for the SBA Small Business Summit. So this Small Business Administration. So in Hawaii, we have different partners. So we are one of the partners for that, but also to the Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, as well as the Veterans Business Outreach Center as well too. So tomorrow we actually have a big event that's coming up for the summit, where we're going to be hosting workshops to help small businesses to continue to overcome the challenges that you're being faced with when it comes to COVID. So including changing your market demand, because we know that, that's also too on people's minds as they pivot their business. But also to the financial assistance resources that are available on the federal, state, as well as county level. I know a lot of people are interested in that, but also to financing, in this new normal as well too. So Maylin actually put in the link to the event page over there. So please be sure to check that out. There's still time to register. In addition, we know that for a lot of your businesses, many of you have been in business for a while now. We do actually have a workshop series that's coming up under our Grow My Business program on recovery, resilience, as well as growth. So, really focusing, on making sure that you have a strong foundation to help you get through this time. Noella will actually be leading that. So if you do have any, Noella?
Just one clarification. It's actually not a workshop per se. It's our signature 7-week course. We meet twice a week, and it's business training. Actually, it's this, but way more, and it's a deeper dive, and you're gonna get a certificate at the end. So it's our Grow My Business cohort 16. Actually, we do it 3 times a year. But the marvelous thing about this one, everyone, is it's being subsidized by the SBA. So it's a $400 value, and it's gonna be free. Free. So if you want to learn how to grow, create a more resiliency in your business, apply. You have to apply. It's vetted. But this coming Friday at 5:30, we're doing an info session if you're curious and want to think about joining us. Okay, thanks, Brittany. Just wanted to clarify.
All right. Well, I believe that pretty much sums it up. So, thank you again for all of you for joining us and staying long. I know that we did go over time. Again, if you have any questions, our contact information is up here on the screen. And, please contact us. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.